webinar about acquiring baseline printing data. My name is Stephanie Henninger, and I will be your moderator today for today's webinar. We have just a couple of house rules. We ask that your microphones remain on mute throughout the presentation. If you do have any questions, please type them into the chat box to the right of your screen, and I will hold those until the end of the webinar when we will address them. If there are questions that we aren't able to answer live, we will be posting all questions and answers on the Pharos community along with the recording of this webinar. Today, Cal Curtis, Beacon's product manager, will be explaining why baseline data is important, sharing 5 printing metrics we consider low-hanging fruit in the battle to reduce operating costs, recommending actions you can take to begin positively contributing to your company's goals, and demonstrating how to use Pharos Beacon to capture those metrics. Let's welcome Cal.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cal Curtis, as Stephanie indicated, and I am the product manager for Beacon. I first wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule to listen in. It's very exciting for me as a product manager to see interest, and I'll try and make it worth your while as we go through this. So as Stephanie introduced, the focus of this presentation is really on being able to collect good data about your print environment and then do something about it. And that's really the essence of Beacon, the product that we've created. One of the advantages of working for a company like Pharos is that we have an opportunity to work with a lot of different types of customers, from corporations to universities. And one of the things we notice is that people are always surprised on how much they spend on print and the reoccurring nature of those expenses. And I'm sure when you think about your own organization and the amount of print that goes through, you have the same feeling that this is essentially an area in which we can save a lot of money if we just were able to understand how things were flowing through the print environment. So one of the things about print also is that it's often an unconscious act. So people have always printed, and they will continue to print. They do it without really thinking. And one of the reasons that it's been difficult for our customers to make changes in that behavior is really that it's hard to collect a good set of information about how print is created. The reason it's hard is that traditionally it's been very expensive in terms of the equipment you need to buy and install and maintain. And it also requires quite a bit of domain knowledge in what changes you can make. So those two aspects have kind of combined to make self-management, if you will, of your print environment something that was kind of outsourced. And so Beacon really set out to solve that problem by making it extremely easy to collect data and provide guidance on what you can do to improve that. And so what I intend to do today is kind of walk through some common scenarios that we've seen in our experience with customers, and how you can use Beacon to kind of accomplish those two things: get good data and make decisions on how to improve your print environment. So I thought we'd start with the importance of baseline data. And this is something, if you talk to MPS providers, is really their first step in any analysis of a print environment. And it's also the first step in any decision-making process. I've had the opportunity to work in areas outside of print. Really anything that you're working on that requires a decision, you need to start from the basis of knowledge. What is currently happening in whatever domain you're talking about, in this case, print. And so that's really what the baseline is. It's a period of time in which you monitor to understand how print is created in your organization. And we typically see that in a 30 to 60-day run. So after that period of time, you have a really good understanding of what applications are used to print, how many devices you have, how much it's costing you, etc. Again, is an area that typically you may have a lot of different tools. You may partner with different companies to do those things. What we try to do with Beacon is allow you to have a holistic view of your entire organization, how it prints, and be able to do that very easily through some simple steps that can take somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes to start building this baseline data. The outcome of the baseline data is identification of opportunities, actions you can take to improve the way print behave, your print is flowing through the environment. And so from this baseline data, you can start making decisions. And our friend William Edwards Deming, a good 1960s looking gentleman, he was a statistician who said, really, data is the basis on which you make decisions. Otherwise, it's just an opinion. And so the reason it's important to have this data, again, is that you can decide what action to take to best meet your objectives. So certainly in the creation of Beacon, we set out to make it really easy to collect the data, but we didn't want to stop there. We knew that being able to do something about it or take the action is really the key thing. Then once you have an understanding and you know where the low-hanging fruit is, you'd like to establish a metric and set that metric and try and meet it over time. And then you can reflect on it over, let's say, a 6-month period and see how you're measuring up against that target. And we have a specific area in the application that we'll go through where you can set a target for any one of the key metrics and then track against it over time. And then continue to iterate on that and come back. So with every change you make, you've kind of reset the baseline. So while the baseline is kind of at the introduction, the starting point, it's also the point that you continue to refer to after you make some kind of change. The difference between a well-managed environment and one that's not as well-managed typically boils down to the ability to see data and the ability to take a good action. And again, in working with a range of customers, we've noticed those being the key differentiators. A customer that has good control over their print costs typically is one that has access to a rich set of data about it and then are able to take some kind of action in the print environment to change that. So really one of the key questions here is how much print is being consumed. I mentioned in the beginning that print is often an unconscious act, and being able to move it from an unconscious to a conscious act is really one of the key low-hanging fruit opportunities that we've seen, and that's really around print user behavior. So just being able to change the way in which people behave with print is an opportunity you have when you have access to the data. And just to give a simple example, and we'll walk through some of these, the cost of a printed page is typically 2 cents for black and white or 10 cents for color. But if you roll in the entire life cycle of that document, it's often 10x that. So some of these simple user behavior changes around printing less color, printing less single-sided pages has a real impact on both the cost that you incur and the environmental impact associated with print, which is another important part of controlling the print that goes through your organization. So one question you can ask yourself is, are you currently aware of how much print your organization is creating? So if you think about that and reflect on it, and that means in the case of universities, how much are the students printing? How much of that print is being reimbursed? How much is the back office printing? So if you think about your organization holistically, is this a question that you can answer today yourself? Or is it kind of outside of your reach? And the answer to that question really determines your ability to control print. And our goal and what we hope to do is give you and empower you to move from I don't know the answer to this question to I do know the answer to this question. I'm pretty sure I know what I can do about it. So we talked a little bit about the 5 key areas that you can kind of attack that we think are key metrics to print. The first one is changing print behavior within the organization. And when I think of actions you can take to improve your print environment, I think there's 3 high-level categories. The first is changes don't require you to make really any investment in infrastructure or renegotiate contracts, and that really is making people aware of the impact of print. And that's as simple as having visibility into how much it impacts the organization. So every dollar you spend on unnecessary print or inefficiency in print is a dollar that's not going towards other more important activities. So that's the low-hanging fruit, and in fact, the good news about that is it often is the most powerful change you can make. So while you could go in and remove devices and upgrade the fleet, starting with not printing as much, we find is oftentimes 40% reduction right off the top. And that's just making print a conscious activity. And so that is certainly a good place to start because it doesn't require a huge investment of time. The second category is the infrastructure change, and we'll give an example of that today. And that is, you may have a fleet of devices where you have too many devices, you have local devices. I kind of consider that the next level of change in that there's an action that's required, going in and taking out devices, redesigning your fleet to be more efficient. And that's kind of, I guess, the next checkpoint in the journey to improving print. And then lastly is kind of business process change. So once you have a handle on the type of devices and the cost you're paying for them, you can change things like your contracts with providers, renegotiate the cost of devices. And so those are the types of changes that you can make as you go through the journey of understanding how print is used in your organization. So now I'm going to move from the PowerPoint slide here over to an example of how you can use the data in Beacon to communicate change within your organization. And so those of you that have Beacon or may be familiar with this dashboard, what you're looking at now is what we call the Print Analytics dashboard. And it contains 6 cards when you log in. And these are essentially a strategic view of how people print in your organization. And so we track how much are people spending per user, how much color volume in terms of percent, how much single-sided volume, the ratio between the number of people who print and the devices in your organization, the same thing for local devices, and then an outlier card. And so when we talk about the influences you can have to improve your print environment, these are the ones that we think are important enough to have its own dashboard. And so we talk about providing guidance in Beacon. One of the ways in which we do provide that guidance is showing you the metrics that are important and allowing you to set targets for each of them. And so what I would like to start with here is the outlier card. One of the things we've learned in our engagement with customers is that oftentimes the top 20% of users or applications generate 80% of the volume. And so if we look at the outliers card, you can have a quick look at users in the organization that produce the most print. And one of the things we are often cautious of is we don't want to make decisions on this. These may be appropriate use of print, but it's information that you can use based on your knowledge of the organization to make important changes. So there's a view of print users, of the cost by application. Again, typically if we see something like Internet Explorer generating $2,500 of print a month, that's certainly an area you'd look at and say that's probably not business critical, or there may be a better way of dealing with that type of data. And then, of course, the department view. When we talked about having a holistic view of print, this is a way of looking at it by business department. And you'll see as we drill into this that you're able to view data, slice and dice it in a variety of ways, and then share that view with people in your organization, which is really a key part of making behavior changes. So this is just kind of an overview of the print analytics area and represents how users behave and the type of print they create. On each one of these cards we can drill in, and we'll give an example of how you can use this data to make a meaningful change. So into that high-level card, we're brought into what we call the Explorer, where you can essentially slice and dice this data by location or department. And I'm going to focus in on the department level, which is, again, something we typically see our customers do. And so as a user of the system who has visibility into the entire print organization, I can now see which departments are generating the most cost on a monthly basis, and you can see I can adjust these. This is a very easy indication of where you may have opportunities to improve print. And something I'd like to highlight here is that one of the important parts of changing user behavior is to empower people at the department level to understand how print affects them. And so while I sit here as an administrator, I can see all of these departments. If I choose to kind of drill in on the highest cost department, I can invite someone from that department into Beacon to take ownership of how print is created in that department. And so as an example, I'm going to log out as the power user that can see the entire organization and log back in as the user assigned to that department only. And the idea here is that being able to communicate to that department head how they compare to other departments and the type of printing that goes through their department, they have the opportunity to change it. So the dashboard now has changed to reflect only print within that highest cost department. And I can now go in and invite, in this case, myself, I can invite a user in to log in and look at this dashboard. So now when I go in, if I am the department head and I have a goal to keep costs under $2 a person, I can go down into my department. Now I only have access to that view and look at all the print users within my department who are contributing to my department's cost. And in this case, I can do some of the things, and we'll come back to this. For example, put a program in place to recognize within this department that color print is 8 times more expensive than black and white print. And again, make that a conscious decision that I will print color when color is required of me, and I will print mono when it's not. And at the end of this presentation, we're going to have some suggestions and opportunities on ways in which you can implement that. And it's essentially a change management program that makes people aware of the impact of print. So this is kind of in the category of democratizing the data, in which someone that has a view into the entire organization sets targets or goals for other departments or locations or any way you want to slice it up, that they can go in now and have a clear view of the areas of the organization in which they have control or ownership. And a couple examples of specific changes that we've seen customers make is an email out to the top 10 costliest print users in a quarter, for example. So in this case, now that I have a list of the highest cost print users within this department, and a change management program is put in place, you can send out a simple message to these users and say, you're in the top 10 most costly users, and we are trying to reduce the amount of color, whatever initiative you have. And so the knowledge that the organization knows how print is being created, and then communicating that that has an impact on the organization, the environment, is really a powerful change agent to improve print. And again, none of these things can happen without the data, without the ability to communicate that clearly throughout the organization. So we'll circle back around a little bit to this concept of user behavior change and some of the tools that we can provide you guys to help out with those. But at a high level, the idea is that once you have the system up and running, and again, it's a very short, easy process, you have access to this data after it runs 30 or 60 days and can start communicating it out to the people who can make change happen. So what other opportunities do we have for change more specifically? The first one we're going to look at is the percentage of print that is double-sided. And in this category of print, obviously, every page that you print impacts the environment, the organization in terms of cost and sustainability. It also incurs service costs. So we know from practice that moving from single-sided to double-sided print has a lot of benefits to the organization. And one of the benchmarks that we talk about is to try and make it so that 60% of the print created in your environment is duplex. And so we have a way of doing that within Beacon that I'll demonstrate now. I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit between the PowerPoint and the application as it demonstrates these things. So what I'd like to introduce here is the concept of setting a target. And as you guys can see in these cards, they are color-coded red, which is an indication that the current state exceeds the desired future state. And that's indicated by this target check mark. And so what I've set here is a target for the organization to go from 85% single-sided print, or 15% of the print being duplex, down to something that is more in line with what we consider a good place, and that is 40% of your print being single-sided, 60% duplex. And to do that, it's as simple as going into this target setting area and selecting the area of focus and changing it from the current state down to the desired state just by setting the slider or entering a value. And again, the benchmark that we have of 60% duplex is one that we've seen in our travels with different customers. But this really is based on how your department and your organization functions. There may be need or requirements for single-sided, and you can adjust the target as you see fit. And one of the kind of rules of thumb is wherever you're at without any change, you can take 20% off of that and incrementally improve it over time. And so now that I've set this target, I have a future state I would like to achieve. And to do that, again, I can kind of explore through this data to look for opportunity for improvement. And again, typically we would look at either the department or the device level. So now I'm slicing this data, again, within this department into which devices are producing the most single-sided volume. And this will give us an indication of setting that particular device to duplex, and again, encouraging the user behavior change. And so for within the department level, this can be done either if you have multiple locations, by location, by user. So looking for users who create the most single-sided volume, all the way down to the devices. So this is an example of kind of going through and looking for opportunity to go from single-sided to double-sided print. All right, let me bounce back to our PowerPoint. All right, the big cost generator here is the cost of color print. As we say in the slide here, color is often 7 to 10 times the cost of black and white print. And obviously color is an important tool for communication, particularly with brand colors or presentations. But oftentimes we see documents being printed color, again, out of unconsciousness or not driven by business need. And so being able to reduce cost, specifically going from color to black and white, is really one of the key knobs. And as we see here, 70% of all printing expense could be considered waste and eliminated. If you can change just 20% of the color volume over to mono, black and white, that's a significant cost savings because of the huge difference between cost and printing color and black and white. So every page saves you 700 to 1,000%. And as we work with customers, we typically look to target color being in the 10% area. Again, this is also driven by what your organization does and its need for color. But that's just kind of a rule of thumb that we've seen. And this is certainly a key focus within Beacon that I'll go into. And for those of you that have used Beacon, I am kind of focused on print analytics right now because print analytics is really the place in which we look at print behavior. I am going to get to Fleet Manager dashboard as well. The Fleet Manager dashboard is another view of the data, but from the device. So that's more of on the infrastructure side. You're looking at how devices create cost. And so I'll get there when we talk about user to device ratio and complexity. But because the low-hanging fruit really is around print behavior, kind of focused in on the print analytics area. So here we are at the color volume card. I also have set a target. We talked about 10 to 15%. So given the current state of color print in this sample account, we can see that our color percentage right now is at 42%. And to move that down to 15% is a fairly significant gap to close, but one we can do by setting this target and again communicating down to the department level or the actionable level. And so as we drill into the color volume, if I was the department head and looking for opportunities to migrate from color to mono, I would typically in this case look at individual print users and change my view to monthly color cost or monthly color volume. And this data that we have in this account is actually a pretty well-functioning organization from the standpoint of there's not a lot of outliers. What we do typically see right at the baseline time is you will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% of your users behaving very differently than the others. So you'll see significant outliers that can be addressed. And again, not mostly out of knowledge. I mean, our experience is that people aren't aware that the difference between color and mono is as significant and that they can participate in proving that. So here's an example that I kind of drill into at the user level and see who's printing color, followed by the application level, which allows you to look for areas where you may not expect to see color print. So if we look at Word, Adobe Reader or Internet Explorer, certainly Excel doesn't seem like a great program to be printing color from. So you can continually to recursively drill down in that and say, okay, who is printing Excel pages in color? Now we have a list of bad behaved people. Kidding, but this is a list of people who would be printing Excel in color. It sounds outrageous, but we see it all the time. Things being printed in color that don't need to be. And so being able to kind of go through this data, in 5-10 minutes and put a change management program in place to reduce color can literally save hundreds of thousands of dollars for an organization without having to change the location of printers, anything about the way people print. These are just changes based on knowledge and information. So as we move down the line, we get to our first essentially infrastructure-based change that we can make. And this is a measure essentially of efficiency. How many devices do you have per print user? And you can imagine having extra devices running in your organization. So more devices than you need in order to be convenient is quite an added expense in terms of those devices need to be serviced, they need to have supplies, etc. And so one of the kind of striking values is that for every employee in your organization, we see an average of about $1,000 spent for the full life cycle of print, including the cost of paper, delivery, disposal, the device service, supply, waste, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to streamline your environment, and typically we see this as after the user behavior change, when you can start to squeeze volume, unnecessary volume, and cost out of the organization. Once you do that, it's typically you're going to have more devices than you need. So you may even have devices that are supporting non-business essential print. So after 6 months or so, and you've been able to knock out 20% of volume and reduce your costs just by letting people know about their print behavior, really the next step is to improve the efficiency of the infrastructure supporting those users. And our best-in-class customers typically are at 6-to-1 ratio, so for one print device for every 6 people, and those devices are operating at 80% utilization. And there's a relationship between utilization and user-to-device ratio. So utilization is essentially a measure of a printer's use against what it's capable of. And so in Beacon, we have a formula that we've created for measuring utilization, with 100% representing that point at which a device is being used efficiently. This is different than I know a lot of other types of products that they'll say it's 12 or 15%, but we've changed that to be 100% to be easier to digest. If you're overutilized, you're essentially driving the printer harder than it's intended and incurs additional service costs. And if you are underutilizing a printer, it means you're paying more for service than you're getting out of it. And so that's the kind of trade-off. You want to be as close to that sweet spot as you can in order to be as efficient as possible. So we'll go back to our application, and we're going to move over to the Fleet Manager dashboard in this example. So what we had been looking at in Print Analytics was the dashboard related to how people print. And Fleet Manager is another view of the same print environment, but from the perspective of print devices. So in this particular case, without going into all the technical details, we are speaking to each individual device that we're scanning, and we're finding out information about it. What type of device is it? How many are there? And how much volume is going through them. So like we have in Print Analytics, in Fleet Manager we have 6 key metrics about your devices. One is what is the cost of those devices, the volume, the utilization we talked about, and you can see 6.35% being quite low, also very typical. So we have certainly seen entire organizations that are under 5% utilized, which means they have a tremendous amount of access capacity. We have the composition card, which is a measure of the total number of devices and the split by manufacturer and model. The life is how old are the devices, and the sustainability is the impact on the environment based on paper volume. So when we talk about the user-to-device ratio, there's a couple of ways this can be measured. One is just the sheer number of devices that we've discovered, divided by the number of users that use those devices. And in this case, this is kind of an extraordinary example. There are 33 users per device. And this actually is not atypical for a university in particular, where you have a lot of students using devices. This would be very unusual in a corporate environment. So this is an example of the type of organization you work for very much influences your desired outcome here. In any case, user-to-device ratio is an example in which you kind of combine the user behavior with the number of devices. So one of the things that we can see here is that there are 231 devices and 1,698 print users. But really more importantly is the utilization of those devices being quite low. So we have an opportunity here to identify devices that can be removed or otherwise redirected to increase the utilization. So what we can do here is we can now drill in and look for individual devices that have low utilization in an effort to remove those that aren't being utilized much. And so when I click on that card, I am automatically brought into a list of all of the devices in my print environment and ranked by lowest utilization. And so we do also break them into color and black and white. And so you can see we have a set of devices that, in the case of black and white, that are less than 1% used. Again, fairly typical. This is not unusual data. We see this quite often. And so what you can do here is you can identify devices that just aren't being used and slate them in for removal. For each one of these devices, you can set the location, the physical location they are in your organization. And you can also find these devices within Print Analytics to see who prints to them. And really the exercise that we see our customers take is to create a list of devices that are very underutilized, find out where they're located and their cost, and put a plan in place to remove them and migrate the volume off of those devices to other devices to increase their utilization. So having access to the location of these devices, their utilization, you can make intelligent decisions on devices that are in close proximity to these that you can migrate volume to. So essentially the act of removing devices and aggregating volume to remaining devices will have a big impact on your user-to-device ratio and allow you to set a target and drive up to that. I mentioned in Print Analytics we have another view of that relationship, and that is between the users and the device. And so here we have a very similar but slightly different metric, and this is the relationship between the number of people who printed in the last 30 days and devices in the organization. So just another way of looking at it, and likewise can go into this data as I demonstrated with the cost and single-sided volume to identify devices that can be removed and have their volume redirected to other devices. And you can imagine, the activity to do that event is one that would require planning, and planning would be based on the data in the system and making people aware that devices that they currently print to will be moving to another device. So that kind of approach in change management, also removal of the devices, is a bit more of an effort than user behavior change, but also kind of the next step in the process. All right, so fleet complexity is another area that we focus on in the 5 areas that you can change, and that is really how many different makes and models are being managed. And so you can, one of the things we hear all the time is that individuals are purchasing devices or making contracts with OEM sellers and bringing them into the organization, and no one really knows how many local devices there are, how many different types of makes and models. Obviously, the more complex this scenario is, the more inefficient it tends to be. It also reduces your buying power and an ability to negotiate lower prices, kind of that third category of change I highlighted, and being able to change your business processes. So the activity around reducing complexity or reducing the number of makes and models really is identifying how complex is your current state, and then again making a plan in the future to reduce that complexity. And some of that's based on what type of devices do you need? Do they need to be color versus black and white? All decisions that require information. So just jump back to our application again to illustrate this. We will be going into our Fleet Manager dashboard and looking at our composition card. And so you can see out of the 231 devices that we've discovered, there are 8 different manufacturers and 32 different models. So in this example, we have essentially 32 different service activities with different toners and a lot of complexity in managing those. And you can see how this would dovetail into increasing utilization. So once you make the decision to remove devices and increase efficiency, it would make sense to remove devices that increase complexity and potentially increase age. So intelligently deciding which devices to remove often are based on reducing complexity. So similar to the utilization card, we can drill into our composition and identify the manufacturers and models that we may want to streamline. And so you can now combine things like cost per page, location, and age to identify devices that increase your complexity and reduce your efficiency. And this gives us a list of all of the device by manufacturer, and you can use the various tools to further refine looking for triggers on devices that you may want to remove. For example, if I were to take a look at the same device list by cost, we can quickly identify devices here that are high cost from a per page perspective. So we have a set of local devices here that are 45 cents each for color. Those would be obvious opportunities to reduce complexity and cost at the same time. And so one of the goals for Beacon is to really allow you to view print from multiple dimensions. So which device is the highest cost, where is it located, what is the utilization, and you start to circle in on devices that are candidates for removal. And so being able to use these tools in that way is a powerful decision tool in order to improve your fleet design. All right, so that is a kind of an overview of the ways in which you can improve your print environment that is foundationally built on your knowledge of what's happening. And so just to kind of quickly review is the first thing you need to do to start using Beacon is install a small piece of software that starts collecting data from your print environment. That is the Device Scout that unlocks the Fleet Manager dashboard we showed. And also there is a Print Scout that unlocks the Print Analytics dashboard. So those two kind of come together as a complete view of your print environment. So once you have those up and running and let them run for 30 to 60 days, you have a very clear baseline state that shows you some of the key metrics that we just talked about. After you have that baseline, believe it or not, oftentimes it becomes quite apparent looking at the metrics where there's opportunities for improvement. And just to summarize what we talked about, the first is how many devices, how much volume, how much cost is being produced, and is there an opportunity to change print behavior simply by giving access to department heads, to people in your organization that can take responsibility for that. So allowing them to log in and seeing what they currently produce and what the target for the organization is a powerful force in creating that change. Secondly is to go in and look for, quote, the low-hanging fruit. Can you reduce the amount of color being produced? That could be a simple act, again, of letting people know color is 10 times more expensive than black and white. And then targeting devices, people, applications that may be exceeding or not aware of their impact. And then we talked about the double-sided print, moving from single-sided to double-sided print. Again, that can be combined with a change behavior initiative around color. And after that runs for a little while, you start looking at opportunities to actually redesign your fleet. And that would be identifying devices that are old, increase complexity, are expensive, and removing them and migrating the volume from those devices to more devices. So that's at a high level an overview of how Beacon can provide you a baseline state and guidance on how to change the current print environment to be more cost effective. And we think that Beacon and its ease of use is really lot of domain knowledge in this area can have access to and make meaningful change. And to that end, we certainly would like the opportunity to work with our customers to start this, to empower them, to give them the data to make these types of changes and to understand their print environment. And two opportunities we'd like to share with you today. The first is anyone that's willing to trial Beacon and run the scouts for a period of time to collect data and build this baseline. We are offering an invitation-only webinar so that we can review the data kind of collectively and make suggestions on things that you can do to your organization. And the reason we're doing this is really to encourage people to get to that baseline state. So what we see a lot of times is people are interested in Beacon, but they get busy and they have a hard time kind of being able to get to it or to make that decision. So in this opportunity, we hope to leverage our experience with other customers to help everybody that wants to sign up for the free trial to understand the data and make meaningful changes. And the second opportunity, and everyone can do one, two, or both, is to let us give you a user behavior communication package. So one of the things we talked about is making people aware and conscious of their print decisions. And it's something that we have a lot of experience in with our customers. And so we have a series of communication tools that you can deploy out in your organization to influence the way people print. And so if you're willing to sign up for a free trial and run and collect data for 60 days, once that's complete, again, you'll be at your baseline state. So these kind of both require you to have a baseline understanding of your print. We will provide you the communication tools that we use and that people pay us to provide them to communicate with users in order to change their print behavior. And these are things like posters, etc., communication tools that will make people aware of how print impacts the organization. And so, you know, we certainly want to be partners in helping everyone create better print environments. And we did a tremendous amount of investment in Beacon in order to make this very easy and to change the way the industry works from depending on other people for data, depending on outside organizations to build your baseline, and transitioning that power directly to our customers. And once they have that data, they really have the power to own their future and make decisions themselves. And that's our goal. And this presentation and future presentations, as well as these opportunities, are really in an effort to assist with that and to partner with our customers to take ownership of their print environment. And so with that is a wrap of this presentation and transition into the question and answer period if we have any questions.
Thank you.
They're not hard. I hope they're not hard.
Thank you, Cal. We do have a couple of questions that came in, so we will tackle those with the time that we have remaining. The first question is, how is the device utilization percentage calculated?
That's a very popular question. So I had mentioned that utilization, we have kind of a proprietary calculation on that, but essentially what it is a target volume for a particular model, and we don't use duty cycle or any of the marketing information about how much volume should go through a printer. We actually do it by the category of printer and our experience with the efficiency of those. So essentially what we do is we identify what the model is. We assign that model to what we call a category. And then based on its category, we assign it a target volume. Once we know the target volume and we know the actual volume, we essentially have a simple relationship between those two. And if actual volume equals target volume, it's 100% utilized. If it's not, it's underutilized. If it's over, it's overutilized. And again, you can imagine there's a bit of art and science to the utilization calculation. But and it's not exactly precise, obviously, but we think if you're in the above 70% utilization, you're certainly doing very well. And so that's how we calculate utilization, and why we think it's an important metric for understanding the efficiency of a individual device and of your fleet of devices.
To go along with that question, Cal, can the target volume of the device be adjusted to create a customized utilization?
We don't. We do not have that ability in Beacon today. We do allow you to adjust a couple of things about the device, which may be a question, but one is the cost of it. So we have a variety of ways in which you can define what the cost of a device is. But in terms of the target volume, we do show you it. So you can look at it in the grids and you can see what the target volume is for that device. But that's actually a good suggestion. I would say that in an effort to make it easy, we have a database of tens and tens of thousands of different models in which we have assigned the target volume. But that's certainly something we can look at. Most of our customers don't have the ability to make those types of decisions, but it's something that we can look at, but we don't have as of today.
Okay. The next question, how do you account for the cost per page differences between different brands, models, printers?
Yeah, similar to the target volume, we have what we call a street cost for all of the models in our database. And the street cost is we actually purchase a database that gives us that street cost that's updated on a weekly basis. And so for every model that we discover, we assign that street cost, which we think is a good a priori cost from the start. And one way you can use that is to compare it to what you're actually paying, if you know that, because we think that's a good representation of a typical street cost. We do also give you the ability at a per device, per model, either of those levels override the cost of devices that we've discovered in your environment. And there's a bunch of ways you can do that. One is you can go in device by device and assign the cost per page, but we also allow you to import. So you can export a list of devices out of Beacon, and you have now a Excel spreadsheet with every device, serial number, location, etc., associated with that device. And you can enter the cost of each of those and then re-import it, and it will override all the devices kind of in one fell swoop. And that's an improvement we made over time. So the ability to cost devices with your actual cost is, we think, easy to do. But right out of the gate, we derive that cost from a standard database that represents street cost.
Okay. The next question is, are you able to set print defaults such as duplex versus simplex for individual devices of the fleet from within the dashboard?
Good question as well. We do not. So everything that we do in Beacon is really outbound information to us. So we don't do, at this time, any incoming communications to the device, things like updating firmware or changing the settings as noted in the question from single-sided to double-sided. All of that takes place either using manufacturer-provided tools or at the device itself. And so as part of this product right now, and then these are things we're looking at in the future, it is really just asking the device for information and then displaying that information. So there's really no outgoing control of devices.
Okay. I think that is it for the questions. Thank you to everyone for joining our webinar today, and to Cal for sharing great information with us. We will be posting the recording on our community and look forward to many of you giving Beacon a try to gather your own baseline data. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.